So what are self-evaluations? Self-evaluations are any time that you're asked questions like these. How well are you doing? How much are you worth? How effective are you in your job, in your role, in the team? What value do you add to the organization? What value do you add to the team? How important are you in this organization? How important are you to this team? You might even, people make self-evaluations in all sorts of circumstances, and because we ask ourselves these questions, or we're asked these questions in the context of work environments, in the context of volunteer roles that we might have, in the context of sporting teams that we might be a part of, in the context of our friendship groups, and also in the context of our families. Someone said, I feel awkward writing about myself and doing self-evaluations and feel like I'm trying to answer according to what my boss is looking for. Yeah, we do this kind of mental gymnastics. It's kind of, okay, so they have given me this task to write about how well I'm doing, and what I do is I do a bit of mental gymnastics, and I try and get my head inside my boss's head to try and figure out what he or she wants, and then I write what I think that they want. And so it's can be a very, very awkward process, and it's difficult to know what people who are asking for self-evaluations are looking for. If people are asking for self-evaluations, I think the only way to really know is to ask. Sometimes they're just looking for a self-reflective process. In my work, which is different, I think, to many other roles, but maybe there's a crossover. So I provide supervision and I provide training to psychotherapists and counsellors and psychologists, and I'm often asking them to I guess, reflect upon their own participation and their own skill level, and actually, actually mark a lot of essays where people are sort of doing a self critique. And it's interesting because I'm not looking for, I'm great, I'm wonderful, I'm doing a good job, this is awesome. I'm like, oh, that's almost a waste of time. What I'm looking for is what you're aware of in yourself. What you notice about your own experience. What are you challenged by? What are you finding difficult? What are your thoughts and feelings in different situations, and how do you respond to those thoughts and feelings and situations? Okay, so let's press on. So I'm hoping to hear from some of you because someone's asked, what is a self-evaluation? And the definition, which I haven't included in this webinar because I wanted to keep it broad, but the definition, if you Google online self-evaluation, you get the kind of corporate consultant definition. A self-evaluation is a mechanism to allow employees the opportunity to evaluate their own performance. That's a self-evaluation. So when have you had to make a self-evaluation? It sounds like from the comment that I've got there that people have been asked to make self-evaluation. So in what ways have you been asked to make a self-evaluation, do you think? In what ways have you and when have you been asked to evaluate yourself, your own performance, your own participation? Workplace review, annual review, quarterly, as part of performance reviews, as part of professional development plans. We do it, but it's not very clear as to what is required. What are they actually looking for in this self-evaluation? As part of there's a self-review component of completing KPIs. I think in response to, it's not very clear what's required, I'm not sure that anybody really knows what's being looked for. And sometimes, someone said, sometimes we just want to do it for ourselves to see where we stand. Yeah, it's one of those things that just seems like a good idea, but in practice, it's not necessarily. It's difficult to know how helpful it actually is. And one of the things that that I'd suggest is, if you're being asked to make a formal self-evaluation, yeah, thanks. Those, the 5 points from the previous slide, and I think this is really good advice, and this is what I tell my students and my supervisees: don't do it for anybody else. Don't, if you're going to do a self-evaluation, don't get caught up in the mental gymnastics of what do they want, why are they asking these questions, what's this about. Just put it to the side, and come back to, all right, well, okay, I'll do this for me. I don't care about them. I'm going to do it for me. And what's really interesting is that when you do that, you'll probably then do exactly what people, not what they're looking for, but you'll provide them with a really interesting, insightful, thoughtful, reflective response. So that's, I guess, my first tip. And it's really something that's only just come to me as we've been talking about it. If you're being asked to do a formal self-evaluation, don't do it for them. Do it for you. Okay, well, this is a good opportunity for me to self-reflect. So why is it so hard? Why is it so hard? And I think that bit around trying to do the mental gymnastics of why, what do they want? Why are they asking these questions? I think that's a good starting point. But our self-evaluation discussion here crosses over the formal self-evaluations, but also the informal self-evaluation of, how asking those questions in those different contexts that I've talked about: family, friendships, sporting teams, other organizations that you might be a part of. And this is the list of why it's so hard. And not only why is it hard, but why do we get it wrong? Because we get it wrong. And I guess trying to get it right is part of the challenge. And that's where, if you just do it for yourself and make it a reflective exercise, it could be much more useful. So why is it so hard? Lack of information is the first thing. We just don't have the information. Flawed information. The information we do have, particularly around feedback, is flawed. Cultural cringe, I'll talk about that in a moment. And then there's two psychologically validated biases that are well established in the psychological literature in terms of cognitive distortions that all human beings experience and go through. And so we'll talk about those: the negativity bias and the attribution bias. Yeah, that's right. That's the cultural cringe. Thanks for that comment. So how is the information flawed? So most information for self-evaluation comes through feedback from other people, and feedback from other people can be explicit or implicit. It can be hinted at. We can just pick it up. And so the information in the first instance, because it comes from other human beings, and human beings, we like to pride ourselves on how good we are on observing and analysis, but when you look at the psychological research, we're actually pretty poor. So everyone is bringing their own unique perspective, their own bias, their own preferences. Whoever's giving you feedback is giving you feedback from their perspective, and it's not always helpful. So very frequently, the information we have at our disposal is flawed or incomplete. Oh, flawed information. Hang on. Lack of information. Oh, I forgot the lack of, somehow that slide got missing. So the lack of information is we just don't know. So the flawed information is the feedback we get comes from other people, and those people have their own biases. The lack of information is, where do you get information about your own performance? Are there any metrics? People talked about KPIs. To what extent have you been able to measure your own performance? And we will come back to that point later as well. Because what we're going to do is we're going to look at the issues, and we're going to look at how to address those issues. Yeah, as has been pointed out, there's a cultural cringe. Yeah, we really work quite hard in this country to avoid unfavorable socio-cultural descriptors. Yeah, it's kind of perceived as bad to be arrogant, to come across as a know-it-all. To present as kind of a smart aleck or a smart ass, to appear as a teacher's pet. So if you're saying all the things that the manager wants to hear, or that the senior management team or the authority figures want to hear, then other people will go, oh, you're just sucking up, you're crawling, you're a teacher's pet, or people will say, oh, you're showing off. And so, it's been traditionally known in this country as the tall poppy syndrome. That anybody who sticks their neck out too far, just like the tallest poppy in the field, that's the one that's going to get the flower or the head cut off. So we're really cautious and we're really careful about not sticking out too far and not standing out. And I talk to people about this a lot in my work. I'm just thinking of a couple of examples. A client was asking for advice on how to sort of best position themselves for a promotion. I said, oh, we'll go and talk to the people who are responsible or know the people who are responsible for that promotion or that role that's being advertised, and just have a chat and talk about your knowledge about the role, and talk about how you believe that you can do the role well, and you've got the experience, and you've got the knowledge, and you know the previous person that was doing the job, and you feel like you could probably do a better job than they were doing overall because of the attributes that you've got. And this person said, oh, isn't that? Oh, I don't want to say that. Like, wouldn't that be taken as just being overconfident, or wouldn't they look badly upon that? So there is a real cultural cringe there. So we also have a negativity bias. And someone's just said, I feel if I focus, I will just come back to the negativity bias. And this is a little bit the negativity bias. I feel if I focus on the negatives, my boss will too. So I tend to go the other way and try to demonstrate all of the progress that I've made, which in turn makes me feel so awkward. And I play down my achievements, which then makes me feel flat. Yeah, so it's really, I don't want to talk about the so-called negatives, and so I'll try and talk about the positives. But when I talk about the so-called positives, I feel like that's that cultural cringe, and then I just feel yuck at the end of it. And what goes missing in that situation is the authenticity. Yeah, it's this kind of, this is the truth about who I am. Brene Brown is lovely in talking about vulnerability and courage, and one of the lines in one of her TED Talks is that courage comes from the French word corps, meaning heart, and that the definition of courage is to tell the story of who you are with your whole heart. And then her story around Brene Brown's story and teachings around vulnerability are, if you tell the story of who you are with your whole heart, with truth and authenticity and honesty, then people will be drawn to that. People will want to connect with that. People will like it and value that. So we all carry around a negativity bias. It's psychologically built into us as human beings, and the research on this is pretty clear. We tend to pay greater attention to painful, uncomfortable, or otherwise negative perceptions than to joyful, satisfying, or otherwise positive experiences. And this makes sense in a sense. If you think about evolution and survival, then in order to survive in this world, you need to be very wary of getting hurt. And we do. We tend to be pulled in two ways as living creatures. We tend to be pulled towards what nourishes us, what sustains us, and we tend to pull away from what could hurt us. But the impulse to pull away from what will hurt us is more powerful and more pervasive than the tendency to move towards what nourishes and sustains us. And so, we will tend to overemphasize the things that we think aren't doing well. The second psychological bias is called an attribution bias. And this bias is a tendency that we have, particularly in relation to other human beings, to other people, to misattribute behaviors and outcomes to stable personality traits rather than changeable environmental, situational, or systemic factors. So what this means is that I'm more likely to say, actually, I've got some examples here. So the first one is what we call the fundamental attribution error. This is the kind of the main attribution bias. And what we'll say is that, oh, that person, we saw in the example that's classically given is that you see someone bump into someone else, or someone bumps into you, and you're like, oh, how rude, how inconsiderate, that person, that person obviously doesn't care about other people and their personal space. And that's about we think that that's about their personality. That's, oh, they're a rude person, they're an inconsiderate person, that they did that bad thing because that's who they are. But if we see someone do something good and positive, very often we'll attribute that to the circumstances. Oh, it was because they were born with, it's because they're wealthy. They've got lots of creature comforts, so that means that they're able to do that. The weather was the right kind of weather, and it was a sunny day, and so that put them in a good mood, and that meant that they did a nice thing. So this is one of those replicable findings in psychological research that, we tend to say that, the bad thing is because of who the other person is, but the good thing they did is because of the circumstances of the environment around them. But when it comes to ourselves, usually if we stuff up, and I say usually, not always, but usually if we stuff up, we say to ourselves, oh, that was because of, you hear people give excuses. Oh, it was, and I've got kids. I've got three boys coming into their teenage years. So I hear this all this time. Oh, that was because he did that to me, and that was because that wasn't fair, and that was because that other person, and the teacher said, and the other person said, and they did that to me, and that's why I did that thing that I'm not very proud of. So we tend to, when it comes to ourselves, we ascribe the bad thing that we did to the circumstances. But if something goes well, and I can relate to this, if something goes well, and I kind of know that I was just lucky, and this is where poker machines win. Oh, I won on the pokies. Yeah, it's because I'm a lucky person. It's because I won gambling. Turned out my way. I won the lottery. But it must be because of something wonderful about me and and who I am. But if things don't work out, if we lose, it's like, oh, that was because that horse was bad, or it's because the machines are rigged, or et cetera, et cetera. And we do this to all kinds of situations. So we've got all of these kinds of different forces at play, making it really difficult to give honest appraisals. I wanted to sort of see if there was people who were sort of thinking about these negative appraisals and when they might make unhelpful self-evaluations of themselves, even when they don't need to. Are there times where you're just involved in some kind of conversation or activity, and then you go, oh my God, And there's another webinar that I ran in the last couple of weeks on, I forget the topic of the webinar, but it was around sort of negative self-talk. It's the am I enough? And kind of this language of, oh God, I'm such a dork, I'm such a loser, I'm such an idiot, I'm such a, whatever it is that I'm such a. And it's like, that's a negative self-evaluation. Even the kind of I always or I never, those kinds of thought processes, I always stuff things up, I never get things right. I always make things awkward for people. I'm never chosen for the team. All of that is negative self-evaluation. So if you've got any sort of thoughts there, it'd be great if you could share them too in the chat. So how do we make more accurate self-evaluation? So this is the pointy end of it. And, it sort of flows on from what we've talked about. We need to get more accurate information. We need to find a way of overcoming our cultural cringe. We need to find a way of engaging more accurately with reality. And so we can collect information. And some people are really good at this. Some people, because of the kinds of roles they're in, because of their background and training, they're really into analytics, they're really into data mining, they're really into data gathering. A lot of organizations like to generate clear KPIs that can be measured. And they talk about SMART goals. SMART goals are specific, measurable, achievable, realistic and relevant, and they're time sensitive. So we measure up to a certain point in time. So you can figure out what it is that you're trying to measure. If you're wanting to do some kind of self-evaluation, am I working efficiently? Am I working effectively? Okay, well then you put your mind to that. What would be the indicator of me working efficiently, effectively? What would be the indicator of me connecting well with my team? What would be the indicator of me networking in the way that I need to network for my role, in a way that's that's effective? So get clear on the measure, figure out how you might then go about measuring that, and then start the tracking process. And whenever you start a tracking process, it's pointless thinking, oh, I'm going to pay attention to this. Your brain it's a supercomputer, but it's a supercomputer with massive limitations. And keeping track of data is one of the big, keeping accurate track of data is one of the big lapses in human potential. However, we have machines that are really fantastic at that. So keep a written record, start keeping a spreadsheet, find some sort of objective measure to indicate and measure what it is that you're wanting to know about. Seek feedback. Be specific in asking questions of the people around you. This is something that people really struggle with. I struggle with them. It's very difficult to seek feedback because we're very often afraid of what we might hear. Our worst fears, our own negativity bias has us presupposing that we will hear things from people that will reinforce our fears about ourselves. But if that's our fear, and if that's a possibility, then we're better off finding out. So ask the specific questions of the people around you. Ask your manager, ask other managers. This person that I was coaching the other day is looking for that, looking to sort of that promotion and that new role. I said, who can you ask? He goes, well, I don't know what they're looking for. Well, who can you ask? Ask them what they're looking for. Ask them what they're wanting, and then ask for feedback around what it is that you've got that fits that, and what it is that they think that you might need in order to step up into that higher role. Reassure the person that you're talking to, that you're seeking feedback from, that you actually do want to know what they think, and then you need to take it on board. You need to sort of hear that feedback. The best kind of engagement with feedback, I've already sort of said it there, is engagement. Sometimes we seek feedback or we get feedback and it's like, yeah, okay, thanks, yeah, I'll take that on board. Whereas the best kind of response to feedback is, oh yeah, tell me more about that. Okay, that's really interesting. I haven't heard about that before. Oh, okay, so that's a good perspective that I haven't had before. Or oh gosh, that's exactly what I was afraid of. But what is it that you're drawing on to give me that feedback? What is it that you've seen or heard or noticed about me and what I've been doing? And so engage with the other person, have a conversation, keep it light. Don't get too heavy with it. Take it on board, but take everything on board with a grain of salt, because everything that you're getting is perspective, not truth when it comes to other people. Overcome your cultural cringe. You can identify your own thoughts, and the next slides are about how to become aware of and identify your own thoughts. Notice when you hear yourself thinking, I don't want to be a, or I don't want people to think that I'm a, and challenge those thoughts. Yeah, challenge those thoughts. Become aware of the control they have over you. One of our modules in the Uprise app, the retraining thinking module, says, okay, well, what's the consequence of thinking that thought? And the example that one of our attendees gave earlier was that, well, the consequence of thinking that thought is that I downplay myself, I play down my achievements, and then I feel bad about myself afterwards. I feel flat, I feel awkward. And so it's not the situation, it's not the circumstance, it's your thoughts and belief about that circumstance that are causing that emotional response. And they are actually within your control. The last point is around practicing reality testing. Yeah, asking yourself, what is it about the situation and circumstances that has contributed to a particular outcome? Right, and write this down. When you're reality testing, you always have to write it down. Ask yourself, what is it about me? What is it about my values? What is it about my beliefs, my attitudes, my actions that has contributed or might have contributed to this particular outcome, or what it is that I'm experiencing here? Ask yourself how other people, specifically who, how, what, when, how have they contributed to the outcome? What was their participation? There's a lovely pie chart you can do when it's called the responsibility pie. There's a lot of people who feel kind of responsible when things go wrong, and we do this pie chart. And you say, okay, well, let's look at the whole pie of everything that fed into this specific outcome that you're concerned about. And now, who else was responsible now? What was their percentage of responsibility? Well, okay, well, who else was involved? Okay, what about, you know, the situation? What about the weather? What about the system? People often are unable to see the impacts of systems, you know, so how did all of that contribute? And what's the evidence for that? And the hint there is that thoughts and feelings are not evidence. And that's where often we come unstuck. We rely upon our thoughts and feelings and think that that's evidence for the fact of a matter, when actually our thoughts and feelings couldn't be further from the facts. Developing self-awareness is about practicing mindfulness, and these images here are from the Uprise app, so you can go to the Uprise app and go work through these really helpful modules that teach you mindfulness. Mindfulness is the process of becoming aware of the here and now and becoming aware of your thoughts in the here and now. Usually before people start mindfulness, not even aware that their thoughts are going on. But when you start to practice mindfulness, you become very aware of your own thoughts. Once you're aware of your own thoughts, that gives you the ability to separate your thoughts from reality. Because whilst ever you are unaware of your thoughts are just in you, they're driving you, they're making you do what you do, they're making you feel what you feel. The assumption that you will carry with you is that what you think is reality is reality. And of course, one of the big insights of psychology is that thoughts and reality are completely separate things. And once you realize that your thoughts and your reality are completely separate things, it's extremely empowering. And it gives you the ability to challenge your thoughts and go, oh, hang on a second, that's some hangover from my childhood or from my culture or from previous experiences. It doesn't actually apply to the reality of the current situation. And it also gives the opportunity to retrain your thoughts and teach your brain to think in a different way. So one of the things we know about thinking and thought processes, and the most popular psychological model, is that thoughts lead to feelings, lead to behavior. What we know is that you can't stop thoughts. Thoughts are like on some sort of built-in subroutine that just keeps on playing over and over. So you can't just go, oh, I'm just going to stop that routine. It won't stop. It'll keep on coming. But what we can do really effectively is rewrite the routine. And that's actually surprisingly easy. And so once you identify a thought, you challenge the thought, you shake it up a little bit, you loosen its hold on you, and then you can replace it with a new thought that is more adaptive, that is better suited to supporting you to achieve your goals. Okay,